I'm going to use this machine to demonstrate the difference between some sounds that we know, like a timpani and something much longer, like a recorder. It's pretty obvious what's going on there. The difference is, if I hit this sound, it fades away very quickly. If I hit this other sound, I can essentially just hold my key down and the sound sustains. This is all about the movement of sound over time, the volume of sound over time. That's precisely what we're going to get into when we talk about VCA, a voltage controlled amplifier. Listen, it could be dull, this topic. If you think about it in the wrong way, it's not very interesting. But if you think about it like this, every sound has a shape, has a flow over time, has a volume over time. That's how important it is. It relates to every sound that you make. If you can control it, if you know how to move the volume of a sound over time, you will have control and you will make better music. So let's do this. VCAs, here it is. Beep, 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 beep. Let's move over to our oscillator. Much like this, it will play a sound and continue almost forever. In fact, it will just keep going on and on and on until you told it not to. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to plug this output cable into the output of the VCA. That way, hold it under here. That way, we can essentially tell this oscillator when we want it to play and when we don't want it to play. Ah, sweet silence. If I want to, I can use this volume knob here to fade it in, as if it was on a mixer, you know, just making it louder with my hand. If I didn't want to use my hand to do that, I could use something like this. Now this thing is just an envelope generator. Each time it gets a signal or a button press here, it's going to generate a shape and it's going to put that shape over our signal. So it will change in volume over time. Like that. It's a short sound, a bit like our timpani. Like a bit of a lower. There we go. If I put this thing in a loop mode, this will continue to generate a kind of a sequence of notes. Longer at the tail, shorter at the tail. Okay, fine. That's all well and good. What we're doing though is controlling when the sound plays and for how long, the shape of its volume over time. That's what the VCA lets you do. Okay, so let's try to think of other ways we can supply the signal that will change the volume of this sound. Not just this, going although that's handy. Let's try to use this sequencer. Here's a more complicated setup, but we've got a sequencer where I hit play, it's over here, moving a bunch of steps along. The output of those steps is going to control the volume of our signal, right? So they put the first pulse up, there it is. We can create a little bit more rhythm. These are like fade outs kind of. This part of the VCA is controlling how much this variation is actually affecting the output. Here, we only hear the very loudest. This variation is being ignored. Now we're hearing more subtlety. the loudest, and these fade out notes. Each VCA has a certain character in the way that it understands voltage coming in. You have to experiment with different types to see which ones you like and how they behave. So now we have that sequence. Fine. And we can play that a little bit. It's like we have animation on what really is our basic tone, just doing this. Like this is our sound. And all of a sudden, we've got this. Just by hooking up a sequencer, we're stuck on this open note, hooking up a sequencer to the volume of our oscillator. Kind of a strange idea, but it works pretty well. Now, what I've done here, you can see there's a lot more cables than you might expect here in this VCA. The reason for that is, this is the first VCA. Now, this module holds 2 VCAs. I'm going to take the output of our first VCA, which is this sound. I'm going to feed that whole output into the second input of this VCA here. And that allows me to control the whole volume of that shape. That's something I could do with an LFO, for example, instead of using my hand, right? I could fade in and out. Or I could actually sequence it, the movement of that, from another contour. So in this case, I'm taking a clock here that's triggering the main sequence, and I'm also taking a clock here. It's a little bit slower. You can see how this one's going like this, moving on the sequencer along. This one is considerably slower. It's 4 times slower. It's going to generate this shape. Add it on top. Adding new accents. Look, pushes, pushing, like every time it's coming on, it's like pushing the volume of this whole sequence around. Getting quite complicated sequences now. So there you go. As you can tell, playing with these controls really changes the tone of the sound, which is interesting when you just think this is only supposed to control the volume. But think of all the things that go on with volume. If you have a signal that's too loud, you get distortion. Sometimes that distortion can be something you want. So playing with volume gives you access not only to the volume of sounds that go up and down like that, but it also gives you the ability to push a sound so hard that it goes from like forcing through this VCA essentially to the point that it breaks. So it's a very useful tool for tone shaping as well. So yeah, useful guy, this VCA. And we're only using 2. So we could now plug the output of the second VCA, just doing this shape, into another one, so that whole shape could go. You know, you can use your imagination. It could do all kinds of stuff. And one extra thing that I wanted to explore before we move away from this is this idea that the VCA can not only change volume, but it can actually give you access to a different kind of synthesis method called AM. Yep. Right, let's get back to this. What do we have here? We have our oscillator. And we have a looping function generator, which at this speed is basically just going to be an LFO. There's a slow moving wave that's going to change the volume of this oscillator like this. You can see it. We can speed that up, okay? Now what we didn't explore is what happens if this just became super fast, like this. You can even go higher in pitch on this. Now we have this wave, plus it's being modulated by another oscillator, giving us AM synthesis, slightly changing the behavior of this second oscillator. Gives us a lot of different tones. We can now sequence this main oscillator from our sequencer again. Change our second oscillator and we get quite a lot of crazy sounds. Back to using this as a volume shaper. This humble VCA is quite a powerful guy. Bye-bye.